What's up? I'm Brett Scallions. I'm the lead singer of the rock band Fuel. And my earliest rock scene is I was about 4 years old, and my parents took me to see Elvis Presley. And saw him in Memphis, Tennessee at the Mid-South Coliseum. And there's very few people from my generation who can say that they saw Elvis. As I said, I was only about 4 years old when I went, but I didn't make it through the entire concert. I fell asleep at some point, but I do remember, the flashing Elvis lights, the big sign behind him, of his name, and him coming out giving the claw and stuff, and he was wearing the white jumpsuit, with the big the eagle on the front and everything, and the big belt buckle, and it was just an explosion. I remember it at that point in my life, 4 years old, and I'm just sitting there seeing Elvis Presley, and even at that young of an age, I understood completely who he was and what he meant to music. Of course, I passed out. But then I woke up at another part of the show, and I remember him singing. I think he was doing "Love Me Tender," and he had all these scarves around his neck, and he would take these silk scarves off, and he would lay them around the necks of all the old blue-haired women who were in the very front row and stuff like that. So he was definitely, he was Elvis Presley, Elvis fucking Presley, So it was an amazing thing. There's some little images of that show that still to this day I always kind of look back to and think about how amazing of a performer Elvis Presley was, and when I was a child, I would get up on the hearth or on the mantle. That'd be the hearth, wouldn't it? Yeah, the hearth. And that would be my stage, and I would sing and dance and put Elvis records on and entertain the family. So the second that I realized I wanted to be in a band, I'm not even sure if it was a second, but I felt like I always wanted to be a musician. Even starting out when I was 4 years old, like I said earlier, and I was singing and dancing and acting like Elvis. But as I grew older and everything, I was listening to all kinds of Beatles records. The White Album was just mind-blowing for me, and as I grew older, my first records that I actually bought were Kiss Love Gun and Kiss Destroyer. And then as I grew a little older, my first cassette tapes were like Van Halen Fair Warning and Van Halen 2, and I would just listen to them over and over again. Those cassette tapes. I had like a little, those little cassette players that were just the one little, like a 6-inch speaker, not even like a 3-inch speaker in there, and you put the cassette in there and you hit play on there, and I would just sit there and listen to it, over and over again. I'd run the batteries down. And that was like the beginning of me really engulfing myself with the music that I could possibly find. I grew up in small town Tennessee, and it's the Bible Belt, and at that time it was really kind of hard for me to go out and find certain music at times. Like punk rock scene for me was really difficult to find, and later in my life, as I grew up, I finally found out about the Sex Pistols, and when I was like 12 or 13, I found out about the Sex Pistols and Suicidal Tendencies and the Clash and stuff like that, and that was a big moment for me when I found out about that stuff, because it just felt so rebellious, and I always loved that. I would say that like the defining moment though for me, when I really realized, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be that, is like I remember going to see. There's two different instances. I went and saw the Cult on the Sonic Temple tour, and they blew me away on that. I was a huge Cult fan. From listening to the Love album to the Electric album, and then when Sonic Temple came out, they just went ballistic. They were huge at that point, and I remember going to see them in Memphis, and then maybe that same year or maybe a year or two after that, Ozzy Osbourne came out, and he did the No More Tours tour, the very first one. the No More Tours tour, and I saw him with Alice in Chains opening up, and they killed me, man. It was like, all right, those guys are having fun. Those guys love what they do, and I want to do what I love too, you know. So I really focused on trying to be better as a musician and learn more about playing guitar and learn more about playing drums and just groove and how to be a musician, you know. So my passion was found. I just needed to hone it enough to be able to make a living out of it. I never stuck myself to one type of genre or anything like that. I was always open to hearing everything, you know. But growing up, my first records and stuff were the Beatles' White Album, and like I said earlier, Kiss Destroyer, Kiss Love Gun, Van Halen Fair Warning, Van Halen 2. You know, also though my parents gave me a stack of records from when they were younger too, and that record collection was the Mamas and Papas and Creedence Clearwater Revival and you know, stuff like that, you know. And then when I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, my mom, she was trying to get me off the Kiss stuff because my mom hated Kiss, you know, growing up in the Bible Belt and everything. People just thought that Kiss was, you know, the devil's band, when they really weren't. They were just a party band. You know, all their songs were about having a good time and just celebrating life, really. But she gave me a few records. She gave me the Michael Jackson Off the Wall record and the Michael Jackson Thriller record and the Toto 4 record, and I fell in love with those records. They were amazing records, and I loved the groove and everything that on the Michael Jackson records. They just, you know, those were dance rock records, you know. So Michael Jackson was amazing back then to me. In the 80s, you know, the hair bands were huge and stuff, and I thought that I loved Whitesnake, you know, and I loved who else was there? Cinderella, amazing band, you know. There's some I didn't really consider them like hair bands really, because they were bluesy rock bands, you know, and they really knew how to play their instruments and stuff, it seemed like. So there was a lot of really good stuff in there for me. And then as I grew even older and went through high school and stuff, I was listening to U2, you know, with the Boy album and the War album and the Joshua Tree and stuff like that. So good stuff. The town that I grew up in was a dry county, so they didn't even sell alcohol or anything like that, you know, and so there really weren't any bars or anything like that. I had to drive at least a half an hour to an hour to get to the next town just to be able to go see anything. And you know, it was a very sheltered environment when it came to rock and roll and live music and stuff like that. So you know, and once I graduated high school, I went to a town called Jackson, Tennessee, and I was there for a few years, and that's where I started. Really kind of met up with some guys, and we started playing out a little bit and hitting bars and everything, and playing shows and playing like acoustic gigs and stuff like that, playing all covers and stuff like that. But I really, honestly, I didn't really hang out in bars and go to watch bands and stuff like that until I actually became a musician for the most part, you know, and I was the one that was playing the gigs. So I had no idea what was in store for me in the beginning there, because I really had no gauge of watching other people do it a lot and stuff. I just kind of jumped into it, and there it was. The first concert I ever did was about 90, maybe 91. The first like paying gig, you know, where we put together a gig and we had to go to a club and stuff. And it was about 91, and we played this little shithole in the middle of nowhere. It was literally in the woods in Tennessee. There was nothing surrounding it at all. It was in like the bottom, you know, that's what we called it, you know. It was just all woods and everything. And I don't even remember the name of the place, but I remember there were nothing but about maybe 10 people there, and it was like, you know, 65-year-old drunk guys, you know, it's just sitting at the bar and everything. But we didn't even care if nobody was there, because we just wanted to play. But the name of the band was called Cherry Red, and we were playing all cover tunes, and we were playing stuff from like, you know, I don't know, David Lee Roth, and Van Halen too, and then we would do some Steve Miller, and we would do some Led Zeppelin, and we would do, what else would we do? Leonard Skinner and Ted Nugent, stuff like that, man, and we were terrible, I'm sure. You're supposed to suck on your first band and your first gig, so, but nonetheless, we were having a blast, and we felt like we were playing Madison Square Garden. So I think that each band member, I think we made like $2 or $3 each to make on that gig, so that's the first gig, man. Really, the way that Fuel became what Fuel is now is back in 90, I think it was around 96, 95 or 96. We'd done a few of our own demos and everything, and we totally paid for it ourselves and stuff, and we were just trying to do all that we could to be musicians for the most part, and we did the last demo that we did was it was like a 10-song demo called Porcelain, and Porcelain had our first single on it, which was called Shimmer, and we were living in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at the time, and we were playing the local scene there, and I would take the demos and I would put them in like bubble wrap envelopes and stuff, and I would send them to radio stations and to promoters and to anybody I possibly could send them to, and just cross my fingers in hopes that someone would actually open one up and listen to what was there. And luckily for us, some of the stations, they actually opened them up and listened to them, and they loved Shimmer, and they started playing it. And so I started keeping in touch with the radio stations, and they were putting us in their playlist and spinning us every day, giving us like 12 to 15 spins a day. And it was a band that wasn't even signed to a major label or anything. So the local radio stations were really excited about that, to see that there was a local band that had something that could truly give that scene a shot, And sure enough, it's like we had a song in the top 10 on local radio without a record label. So when it was time to really start shopping to the labels and everything, it seemed somewhat easy, because we would go into offices and guys would come into the office and they'd be holding the playlist from the radio station going, "Man, I love your band, you guys are great," and I'm sitting here looking at them going, "Did you even hear the song?" You're just looking at the numbers on the piece of paper there. You see where we are in the charts, but do you know what the song is? So, but they were looking at what matters most to them, and that's chart positioning and stuff like that. And there we were in the charts without a label. So that was the big break for us, for sure. Go to www.rockscene.com and check out Rock Scene. It's not on paper anymore. It's in your living room on your internet.